Howdy folks, you're watching Brass Bear Range. I'm Darryl and, well, welcome to my bathroom. The reason we're starting this presentation in the bathroom rather than the reloading room like we should be is today's presentation is going to be on cleaning fired range brass. And the first step in my process begins right here in the bathroom. Two things to cover before we get started. One, I apologize for any background noise you hear. My bathroom is rather close to my living room and my kitchen, so you may hear my dogs or some other noise. And it's also very hot in here today, so I have a window open. So please just bear with any background noise you may hear. The second item is, well, what exactly is brass? Some of you that are just getting into firearms may not know exactly what the components of a bullet are, or of a round. Brass is the shell casing. It holds the primer, the powder, and the bullet. For example, I have my piece of 5090 Sharps brass. When we say brass, what we are referring to is a metallic cartridge for a rifle or handgun. There are brass for shotguns, but that's for rarer applications. We may get into some of that later on, but all the reloading I do currently in terms of brass are for rifle and handgun. Brass can come in different materials, such as brass. You get nickel-plated brass, and there's also steel casings, which sometimes we'll still refer to just as brass because 90% of the casings you find are actual brass. So why clean it? Let me show you an example of two pieces of brass here. If you check out our social media, you've seen these two pieces in a picture I posted earlier today. These are two pieces of 9mm brass. One looks very shiny and the other one's rather crummy. I'm trying to move it around here so you can really see the difference. The reason we clean our brass is because if we try and run this crummy piece of brass up through our reloading dies, it will start depositing this crud in the die. This can lead to issues. The crud can, as it builds up, start scratching dies, causing scratching your brass, causing damage to it, which then when you fire it, you may get a cracked piece of brass, pressure issues, blow your gun up. Worst case scenario. You can start denting the casings, and normally a dent isn't too bad. If you fire it once, a dent will get pushed out. Some brand new casings you'll see will have dents. 5090 brass, for example, has some dents. And the other reason that we clean it is, of course, so we can see any flaws in the brass. So I mentioned scratches causing potential cracks once you fire it, things of that nature. This dirty piece of brass, we can't necessarily see these things, especially if they're real fine. In a clean piece, you can see every issue that a piece of brass has. Two cases in point here. Pull up this 5090 brass again. You can see there's some very small dents. Like right here is one. You should be able to see. These dents aren't going to cause any issue when I go to reloading and fire this brass, but there could have been, say, a crack here, a very fine crack that I wouldn't see. Pull the trigger, now I may be running into problems. An excellent example of why we clean brass is this piece of 30-06 brass I have here. This piece of brass came from that lot that I purchased from the auction. And you can see it's got a bit of an orangish tint to it. Now you can really see the difference. You can really see an orange tint. The chemical makeup of brass is copper and zinc. Copper obviously has more of a brownish, orangish, reddish tint. The zinc is, once it mixes in with the brass, adds strength and gives it this nice, pretty, more of a golden color. We used to use some copper casings back in the 1800s because light charges of black powder wouldn't cause too many issues, and it worked pretty good. But now that we're up into our smokeless powders, which produce significant pressures, way more pressure than black powder, we use brass, steel, nickel-plated brass, that kind of thing. If we go back down to copper, which is not strong as brass and cannot handle that pressure, the casing can explode. You get cracks, severe pressure issues. That's why we don't use it. Several things can cause brass to start turning back to copper like this. This could have been fired in a corrosive powder that was left on it. Somebody could have try polishing it with like Brasso or something else that's abrasive to brass. The primer could have been corrosive. You know, there's a number of issues that could have caused this piece of brass to start turning bad. The important thing is that by cleaning it, I was able to see the problem. And you'll also see here, you know, I don't know if you can see it too well, there's actually some pitting on this brass, which leads me to believe maybe it sat in Brasso or something too long and it started breaking it down. And then there's some physical damage too, like you can see a scratch there, or maybe hit a piece of concrete. Had I not washed this piece of brass beforehand, I would not have seen any of this. And I believe this one is still safe to use, but if the brass had degraded down to copper any more than this, I could run into some serious issues. I do have some brass in that lot that looks worse than this. I will be reloading this brass with rather light loads to protect myself and my firearm. We'll be doing some testing to see just how degraded the brass can be before it is no longer safe to reload. And hopefully I can get you guys a good presentation on that. But, once again, to see these issues, we need to clean the brass. So let me walk you through my cleaning process and the steps I take to make sure my brass is clean enough to see issues like that and to protect my brass and dies during the reloading process. Let's get started. Alright folks, and once again, the first step in my process is to wash this fired brass. To do that, what I'll do is I'll turn on the bathtub, brass wet, squirt on some dish soap of my choice. Doesn't matter quite how much you use too much, you're just going to be rinsing more obviously. And I just get in here with my hands and mix this around. Now this will get a little noisy, but please bear with me. Okay, now that we get our soap mixed around, we're going to turn our tub back on, let the water get hot. You might be able to see already how dirty the water is. We haven't even really scrubbed the brass or rinsed it. It's very, very efficient for getting your brass clean. Another important thing is make sure you put a stopper in your bathtub or a hair drain, you know, one of the wire mesh baskets or something. A piece of 223 brass won't fit down a standard tub drain. Don't ask me how I know that. Okay, we're starting to get a little warm here now. Once we get our water nice and warm, we'll hit the brass with it again. And then we'll start mixing it again. Alright, once your brass is nice and sudsy, like this, and you can see they're nice and soapy, we're going to rinse them off. Something I highly recommend is buying one of the, put this back on the cold here and get my hands rinsed, one of these detachable shower heads like this. Not only does this clean you fantastic, you can really use this to clean your tub once you wash it, and your brass. And we're just going to give this all a good rinse until we get all the soap out of it. Give her a shake or two. Now, this is a very noisy process once again, so I do apologize. try my hands here real quick. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but this water is pretty disgusting. We've got bits of dirt in here, all the powder that we washed off. But you see now, our brass looks a lot better. The dirtiest piece that we still have is probably this one. You can see it looks significantly better than that 9mm brass we had. You don't have to rinse all the soap off, because once we dry it in the oven and we'll get some water spots, some soap marks, the tumbler will abrase all of that off. So we don't got to worry about getting it absolutely spotless or getting all the soap rinsed out. We're just trying to knock loose all the dirt that may be on this if it sat in the range for a while, and all of the powder. Now, let's head over to the oven and get it popped in and dried. Alright folks, and now we're at the oven. So to set your oven correctly, you want to set the temperature to warm or 200 degrees if you don't have a warm setting for some reason, and set the oven to bake. It's very important that you let the oven come up to temperature, meaning your temperature light goes out before you stick the brass in the oven. The reason for this is if your brass exceeds 300 to 350 degrees, it will start degrading like we saw with that piece of 30-06 brass. The zinc will begin to break down at about 3 to 350. The heating element, even though having it on warm, is going to go to say 500 degrees just to get the oven to temperature. So we wait for it to kick off before we put it in. Like this. We're going to put it in. We're going to put it in as far away from the heating element as we can, so in the top rack. And we'll leave it in there about an hour to 2 hours. It is perfectly safe to put brass in that has spent primers in it, so don't worry about that. In fact, most times I will not deprime or decap my brass until after this first process is finished. A very helpful tip to get your brass to dry a little faster is make sure you stand it up with the case mouth facing down so your primer is pointing towards you. Now it's hard to do with a necked case like this 3030 brass, so I set it with the rim down, the case mouth facing up. This will still allow it to dry a little faster. So in about an hour or two we're going to check this. If it's dry, we'll get it tossed in the tumbler. Alright folks, and once your brass is all nice and dry and cooled down out of the oven, it's time to throw it in a tumbler and get that nice polish that we're looking for. Before I do that, I wanted to show you guys my tumbling media. So this is my tumbling media separator, or at least the two case pieces to it. And you can see that this media appears much darker than this. What I do here is I've got dirty media, or media that's been used in a polish cycle many times. Hundreds and hundreds of brass have been through this by now. And it starts looking real disgusting. I will use that as a cleaning media, tumble it in this for an hour, just to abrase off the spent powder and the other gunk we couldn't get off in the wash. And then I will run it in this for an hour or longer. Sometimes I'll go to sleep and leave it run. This much cleaner media will give a real nice high final polish. When this gets too bad, real disgusting to the point where it's not even cleaning, I will rotate this into here, mix up some fresh media. This is brand new fresh, I just mixed this today. And then I will use this as a cleaner until the new batch is gone. Just keep cycling it over and get a lot of use out of it. The media that I use, actually this super cheap, I don't know how I can see it, Litter Made Premium Clumping Walnut Cat Litter. You get 9 pounds of this. I think I paid $7.50 for that bag at the local Walmart. So you get 9 pounds of it, then you mix in your own polishing media. The one that I prefer and that I've always been told to use, as I've been educated on reloading, is Blue Magic. Now this is the polish cream. They also have a liquid polish. I like the cream because the walnut that I use is clumping, so it will absorb quite a bit of the liquid. Whereas if I use the cream, I can throw it in the media, turn the tumbler on for about an hour and get it nice and distributed. So we get a nice fine distribution of polish throughout the media. And it lasts quite a while, so it's cheaper than buying the pre-made stuff through like Lyman or Hornaday or the other companies that pre-make it. But let's go ahead and get our brass thrown in our tumbler with our much dirtier cleaning media. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get our brass thrown in our tumbler. I'm just going to go ahead and we're just going to dump it right on in there. There we go. Now you don't need to mix the brass down into the media. Obviously, the tumbler will do that for us. Put the lid on. You want to make sure if you've got a vibratory tumbler like my Lyman Turbo Pro 1200 that you screw the lid on down nice and tight. And it will flex in the middle, but don't worry about that. Screw it on nice and tight, or as the tumbling process goes around, the lid will actually come loose and you will hear a ton of noise because the lid will be spinning around in a circle and just vibrating up and down against the case. As you can see here, I have a small crack in the case as well from that happening. So you want to make sure she's torqued down good. Get your brass thrown in there. And we're going to leave her in here like this for about an hour, and then we'll switch out our media with our polishing media. Alright folks, and now that our brass is tumbled in our cleaning media for about an hour, we're going to dump it out into our media separator, this very handy tub we have here. So how this guy works is we grab the tumbler and we just dump her right on in here. Make sure we get everything out. Now of course we're using the lid for the media separator to hold our clean media. So we're going to go ahead and take this opportunity to dump it into the tumbler. Right like that. Then we're going to shake the tumbler a little bit to get everything evened out. We will take the top end of the basket so that our brass doesn't fall out as we're rotating the separator. Clip everything together, make sure it's pretty steady. Then we're going to take the lid, put her on, and you don't really got to clip the lid down, just make sure that the side latches are where they need to be. Give her a hold and just spin her a few times. A little hand crank on the side if you can't see that. After we rotate her a few times, we're going to open her back up. Here, if you couldn't see it, is that hand crank I was spinning. Just open her back up. And now all of the cleaning media has fallen into the basket, or out of the basket, and into the case. And here's all of our brass, with no walnut shell left in it. So we'll just dump this right back into the tumbler, into the clean media that we'll use for our polishing cycle. Get this out of our way. Get our lid back on and lock it down nice and tight. Let's start our polishing cycle. And here, guys, we have just pulled the brass out of the tumbler on our polishing cycle. As you can see, this brass is significantly better looking than when we first started. However, you can see it's still a little dull looking. This piece here looks pretty good. You can see it's still kind of dull. The reason for this is the magic glue that I use leaves a protective film over the brass, kind of a little waxy, and it also traps in some of that walnut dust. And that necessitates a second cleaning cycle. I can see there's a little bit of junk built up in there, some of the built up magic glue. So once again, we need to clean this brass. And you'll see a little bit of walnut shell come out. But wait until you see this once we get it finished this time. our water to warm up here. Now, why it's important to wash it the second time to get the film and the dust off of the case. You could just wipe the case down with a paper towel to get that off. However, there will be some junk down inside some of these. A little bit of that film. Some of them may have a little bit of walnut shell left over. And we want to get that out. The greasiness of that film could potentially affect powder ignition. So by cleaning that out of there one last time, we get very nice and shiny brass that won't affect ignition when we go to actually reload and fire this ammunition. And you'll notice, folks, here that our clean brass has sudsed up significantly better than when it was dirty. We'll give this a final rinse and we'll have a quick look. Apologize if my fat head got in the frame at all. Now, at this rinse cycle, we want to make sure we get as much soap off as possible. Not like the other cycle. We want this to be as absolutely clean as it can get. You might be able to see in the tub there, the water is a little murky. That's from the dust and that waxy tight coating that the magic glue puts on the brass to protect it. Turn that off for a second. I don't want to put this back in the soap, so let me move this over here. Have a look at this. Now, this piece here isn't too good of an example. It appears as though that had some residual crust on it. Here is an excellent piece. Here, folks, you can see, look at that beautiful, shiny brass. Couple of spots on this one. Looks like maybe the brass breaking down. This is why we clean this brass. You can see how significantly cleaner it is versus when we started. It looks almost brand new minus these spots. Now we'll go put it in our final heating drying cycle and we'll have a look. And here, folks, you can see our finished product. This piece of brass here is the one that went through our second drying process, and you can see it is beautiful. Clean, pristine piece of brass. Gonna put back down here. From left to right, you can see a piece of brass from every stage in our process. You've got a totally untouched piece of fired 3030 brass, our first scrubbing, our first drying, our clean tumbling in the dirty media, polishing tumbling in the clean media, second scrubbing, second drying. Now you notice that the second drying and the first drying are a little bit darker and duller than their subsequent scrubbing processes. And the reason for this is the way we've dried it. The heat will slightly darken the brass, and also it will, the way it dries the water, leave a couple of water spots. And there's some tools out there now to try and mitigate this. Like Lyman makes they call it their Vortex Dryer, or their Hurricane Dryer. Kind of looks like a jerky dehydrator if you've ever seen one. And it dries the brass without the heat to kind of, get rid of this effect that we see here. The best way to do this would be on a nice hot sunny day, you just wrap your brass up in a towel, dark colored towel, and set it outside. And it will dry and it will look just as nice as this. But, as you can see, you can kind of see the reflection of the camera and myself in this brass. All of this brass, actually, I'm getting a little reflection even out of the dirty one, but these last 3 pieces of brass are reflecting just the same as our totally unused brand new piece of 5090 brass. And I can tell you just from visual inspection, this looks a little brighter. So even if we leave this piece of brass the way it is still in a slightly better condition than our piece of brand new brass. And this is a piece of Starline brass. It's not cheap. Starline's widely regarded as one of the best brass manufacturers in the world, so this is high quality. They just need to pump out a lot more than we do. So even our quick drying process will give us a better final finish than what they can do. But however, we can make this better. After we fully reload this ammunition, and I'm talking we get the primer, the powder, and the bullet in there, we can then throw the fully loaded cartridge back in our vibratory tumbler. A lot of people will tell you this is unsafe, but it's just not true. A lot of commercial reloaders like Hornady and Federal will do a final tumble on their fully loaded ammunition to give you that brand new ammunition look. That fresh out of the box, shiny ammo that you expect to see, you see because they tumble their finished rounds. Ours will come out looking better because we have a much smaller batch, and if we keep cycling out our tumbling media and we keep the clean stuff, it'll come out even better than the factory ammunition in terms of looks, and will not degrade the ammunition anyway, and it will not explode in your tumbler. Nothing to worry about. But, as you can see, compared to this, perfectly usable the way it is, and would more than pass as a fine piece of ammunition. And that, folks, is the process that I go through to clean my fire range brass and get it ready for reloading. Now, it is important to note that my process is incredibly lengthy. I started this project at 2 in the afternoon, and it's about 10 at night now. We got 2 drying cycles at an hour apiece. We've got 2 tumbling cycles at an hour apiece. We've got 2 cleaning cycles. It is a lengthy process. So how can we cut down on time? Well, there's two products, really 3, that can help. One's the Cyclone Dryer. They're advertised as supposedly being capable of drying the brass much quicker. That I'm not entirely sure of. I mean, in theory they should, but I have no experience with those products, so I don't want to, report one way or the other. The 2 that will really speed up the process is your wet tumbler and your ultrasonic cleaner. The wet tumbler gets rid of the walnut shell or the corn cob and uses liquid stainless steel pins. You can buy pre-mixed stuff from like Lyman or Hornady, the other major manufacturers, just like you would with hard polishing media for a vibratory tumbler. Or you can mix up your own with hot water, dish soap of your choice, and a liquid polish of your choice. I once again recommend Blue Magic. There's a lot of misinformation online on which polishes you can or really shouldn't be using when you're working with brass. Brasso and Let Me Shine are 2 of the most recommended. Brasso, I know for a fact, will strip brass back down to copper if it's in it too long. Let Me Shine, I believe, will as well, but I'm not entirely certain on that. So at a later date, I'm going to do a video on some of those polishes and show you why you should or shouldn't use them. But once again, that'll be in a later video. So you get all this mixed together with your stainless steel pins, and it will tumble those pins around and also clean the brass with the water. Or, the pre-mixed liquid if you use that. And combine it all in one. Now, sometimes those stainless steel pins are capable of getting stuck in a flash hole. That is, the hole that the primer will ignite through to ignite the powder. That can be a pain. So the much more efficient piece of equipment is the ultrasonic cleaner. That works by you just mix up the same thing, those liquid premixed liquid cleaners or your hot water, your soap, and your liquid polish. Throw your brass in, and it just vibrates liquid incredibly quickly to strip all the gunk off. I'm personally going to be investing in one of those myself, I believe. I've seen some examples of the brass that come out of those, and they look better than even what I can do with a vibratory tumbler. So I'm really looking into getting into one of those. But it is important to note that if you're just getting into reloading, as long as you're willing to spend a little extra time, you don't need to spend a fortune on case prep equipment. You know, my vibratory tumbler, my media, I've got maybe $150 and everything. And it works just fine. Just takes me a lot more time. So, good weekend project on a rainy day. But if you're a novice, you really don't need to spend a whole lot of money to get into this. It's great fun, and it can really cut down your ammunition costs while, you know, the startup still being modest. Well, folks, if you managed to stick around for this whole lengthy presentation, we greatly appreciate it. We thank you for stopping by and checking us out. If you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like it, subscribe to us here on YouTube, and share it with your friends. I will mention that some of these reloading videos will be quite lengthy. I want to make sure that you guys are educated as best as I'm capable of doing, because if I give you some bad information and you reload a piece of ammunition wrong, you could hurt your firearm, or even worse, yourself. So these will be a little more lengthy, just to let you know. Be sure to comment on the video, you know, let us know what you liked, what you didn't. Stop by and say howdy. We always appreciate you guys coming in and talking with us. And check out our Patreon if you want to get in on some of the giveaways that we'll be doing there. Just stop by and take a look. And thanks again, guys. We greatly appreciate your support so far. Remember, be safe and have fun.